The audio levels are all good. I'll be making a slight different this time because I'm not going to be playing any background music. It is my intention to upload some of these videos to YouTube, and I don't want to get hit with all sorts of copyright problems. And yes, I've just started a second YouTube channel today, and I thought, well, why not start just streaming my normal everyday nightly dev? So it's not going to be a fully voiced over experience. It's just, I don't know, we'll see what happens. I've not really got a plan. Yes, and thank you, Gorbit. My hair is down at the moment. And if you don't know, and you might have seen some of my videos, I'm into archery. I'm a keen archer. I shoot at least once a week. And I quite like some mobile games where you've got to shoot. Now, it's nothing related to archery, really. You've just got to line up a slightly moving target. You've got to take into account the wind. But I quite like the idea of adding some aftertouch properties to the arrow. So we'll see how far we get tonight. I probably won't get it finished at all. But as just starting as I mean to go on, really try and capture some of my normal development process. So I'm just going to get straight on with it. Of course, I'm using the Pixel game engine. There it is, and I've created the skeleton application for the Pixel game engine, which is just overriding the on-user create and on-user update functions. So let's get started. I'm just going to make sure that that actually runs and that all my stream capture and everything catches it. Good, good, good. So what I intend to do first, I think, is to draw the target, and I want to be able to sort of pseudo 3D depth the target. So I intend that the target will be a certain distance away, and you've got to line it up as best you can, taking into account the wind, taking into account movement, depending on your equipment. And as you release the arrow flies forward. I should use the proper terminology. As you loose the arrow, it flies forwards, and we see the target come towards the screen. Because I like the idea of being able to perhaps use some of the keys to change the trajectory of the arrow after you've shot it. So we're not following the real rules of the sport here. Oh, hey, Sign Hunter! I've not seen you in a long time. How you doing, man? You okay? I'm also streaming with the low latency Twitch, so we'll have to see how it goes. Enemy lines, hey, nice to see you too. Right, so I'll start. So I think the first thing I want to do is create some sort of function which draws the target. So we'll just start there. Now I'm just going to move my microphone a little bit. If the audio is a bit different than usual, the reason being is normally when I'm doing these things, I have the microphone right in front of my keyboard and I can't see what I'm doing. But because I want to try and stream just normal Javid dev sessions now, so these aren't necessarily interacting with everybody in the chat, I need to be able to see what I'm doing quite clearly. I'm definitely not copying from a load of crib notes that I've already done before. And if you've joined tonight, or you're watching this video on the new YouTube channel and you're wondering, why isn't this like David's normal YouTube videos? That's because this is just going to be chaotic, it's experimental, I'm going to make mistakes, I don't really know what the full plan is going to involve yet. We're just making it up as I go along. And that's why I really wanted this second channel, because it allows me to be a little bit more free with the things that I'm doing. I like the main channel to be quite formal, but this one I want to just capture these sort of moments, because it's interesting, I think, to see the development. And I know from the main channel, quite a lot of people just enjoy putting me on in the background, perhaps. So we'll see. Somebody has just asked in the Discord chat, is the stream on YouTube too? No, it isn't. I'll just type that in. I don't like streaming on YouTube. The reason I don't like streaming on YouTube is technically it's quite a complicated setup to do before you can do it, and I don't want to stream on my main YouTube channel mainly because we'll be swamped with people in the chat, and there's no point in streaming on the second YouTube channel just yet anyway. Right, so. I'll create a function, draw, in archery it's called a boss, so we'll call it a draw the boss, and that contains the target face. Now I'm doing field archery here, I'm not shooting animals or anything like that, and I anticipate we'll use what are called standard Imperial 122cm faces. I'm going to bore you with lots of archery stuff tonight, but what I want to kind of do is draw it at a particular depth. I think it's always going to be drawn in world space, probably at the same location, so all I need to set is the depth. But will I need to set an arrow offset? Yes, probably I will. We may come to that later on anyway. Draw boss, float, depth. That's probably where I'm going to start. Let's have a quick look at the chats. Okay, Kieran, good. The delay's quite short then. I hope we don't buffer too much for you. When are we going to add flaming arrows? Well, when we've added an arrow is probably the first thing to do. Then we can subclass the arrow into flaming arrows or cats or whatever we want to shoot at the boss. Can we shoot Java programmers? Of course you can. What if you make archery version of Duck Hunt? Well, it could well be. I mean, we'll just have to see how it goes. I have very little plans other than it was Dragon Eye who was playing some darts, and he posted a nice image of a dartboard, and I thought, you know what, some of the games I've enjoyed playing, even though it's a very simple dynamic, are shooting things at targets. Draw the boss. Now, I'm going to just very simply try and get a basic version of the game up and running quite quickly. Excuse me. So we'll draw the boss, and we'll draw it as circles. Now, the main circle, we'll try and get these somewhat relative. So let's say the main radius of the boss is going to be, I don't know, let's pick a number. Let's pick 100 is the main radius. And because as we're going to be drawing it further away and closer to the player, I'm going to need to change that, or scale that radius as required by what's going on with the depth. And we'll have to have a think about all of that. I've not worked out the maths beforehand. What if you made a multiplayer first-person archery game that's similar to Worms? Yeah, these are all very ambitious, given that right now I have a function that declares a variable and nothing else. We'll get there. We'll get there. Right, so let's have a look. Draw circle, I think, is the first thing we want to do, because the targets are circular. And we'll draw it, and this is here, straight away I'm going to need to know sort of an X offset and a Y offset. So let's add those in as well. F offset X, because these are going to move around depending on the scale too. So we'll just set that right now to be 0. And we'll also have an offset Y variable 2. And right, so once we've got those, that's going to be the center of our target. F offset Y and F offset all the way around. There we go. And the radius, now for the big one, we're going to use the full radius. Now we'll have to add in some scaling factors later on. So I want the entire radius. I'm going to imply that by multiplying by 1. And then I want to set the colour. Now the outside colour of an archery target is white, and that is the 1 and 2 scoring zones for metric, or simply 1 for imperial. Now on top of that one, I then want to, actually I don't want to draw circles, I want to fill the circle. Fill the circle. So then we want to draw, what's the next colour? Come on David, you should know these things. The next colour is black. So we'll just fill in the colours in the right order. Black. Blue. Red. And technically it's called gold, but it's actually yellow. Right, so I've got some targets. Now, how are we going to position these around? I'm still not sure. We've got 1. Maybe if we just take it in simple steps. 0.8, 0.6, 0.4, and 0.2. Okay, so for now, let's just draw a boss somewhere in the middle of the screen. So all I've currently got is my depth, so that's no good. So we'll have to add some more parameters as part of the function. But let's for now stay in screen space. We'll try and hack as much of this as we can, but I want to draw it in the middle of the screen. And we'll still draw it, we'll just send through 0 for the depth for the time being. Why are we not seeing screen height? Oh. What's going on here? Because we've not done this bit yet. Yes, that's why. So float fpos x. Yes, fpos x. Why not? And fpos y. And we'll just set. Oh, come on, David. So this is what makes it different from the YouTube videos. Make lots of typos. F offset x. We'll just hard code those in for now. pos y. Let's take a look. Okay, good. Kind of makes me want to go out shooting now. Choosing the radius of 100 was quite fortuitous there. That's kind of a nice size. Now, there will be additional detail on this, and I don't want to draw all the detail when it's really far away, or else it'll look quite murky. So I think as part of this draw boss routine, as we're zooming in, we're going to want to see more and more detail reveal itself, and eventually maybe even things like the score lines and score numbers. There is an additional part to the boss, which is actually the bosses are usually square, but I'll leave that out for now. Right, so if we're setting different depths, naively, one could argue we could multiply what we're scaling everything by the depth. So let's try that. Do you know what? I'm going to try and get used to using some modern technology here. There we go. And if you're wondering why is there not any chiptune playing and you've just joined the stream, simply because now if I'm going to upload these to YouTube, I don't want to be hit with all sorts of copyright issues, and it allows you to put your own music on as necessary. Not creating anything, but we are drawing something, and I want to be able to vary that depth, so I'm going to create a little variable just here, which says, I guess, we'll say distance. All these names are subject to change. Nothing is planned just yet. And we'll set the distance to 0 to begin with. So when the distance is 0, what I'd really want to see is the entire screen being yellow. We're right on the face of the target. So this is why we may need to play with the scaling parameters. So I'll add in some keystrokes to just artificially zoom the target right now. What do I want to do? Get key. OLC key. I'm going to use Q to zoom. Yeah, it's going forwards. Okay, Q going forwards. In which case I want the distance to get lower. It's all going to get confusing this with sort of 1 over things later on. But for now we'll just minus that by, I don't know, some number. 10 times F elapsed time. Smooth it out. And conversely to that, I think we want to have get key A to zoom back. I got that the right way round. So as we're moving forwards, we want the distance to decrease, and as we're moving backwards, we want the distance to increase, which is going to be the opposite way round at some point. Let's just put that in there. See what happens. Yes, so there'll definitely be a 1 over relationship at some point. Oh, hello. Maybe my 10 was a little bit ambitious for debugging, so I'm just going to rein that in a little bit. Yes, there'll definitely be a 1 over relationship at some point, but right now I just want to get some basic drawing routines out the way. Oh, yeah. This will be the Prime Minister. Right, so my target kind of evaporates once it gets to a small enough number of pixels. So that's what I want to avoid, the minimum size target. I want the level of detail to change as we're approaching. And the reason, as Nick has pointed out there, there's definitely a non-linear relationship between me holding down the button and the rate at which the target scales. And that's why we want to sort of emulate a hyperbolic trajectory. Wouldn't you get a 1 over 0 error if you are right at the... Well, that's true, and that would be something that we would factor in, that we would never ideally be right at the target. You know, the camera should probably never get any closer than this. We'll put in these hard constraints later on. So that's scaling okay. At least the circles, they're relative to each other. But if the target's really far away, the player's not going to have very much to aim at. This may be an interesting time to start thinking about, is the resolution actually sensible for what we want to do? Well, we can easily adjust the resolution in this case. Maybe I should try doubling it to just give us a few more pixels at greater distances. So 480, and I'll halve the on-screen pixel size. Well, you can't put a scope on your bow if you're shooting a recurve bow. You can if you're doing compound archery. But that's just cheating, compound archery. It doesn't count. Right, so the radius that we've chose was just some arbitrary number at some point. There we go. So we can actually sort of position the target a little bit further away. Now, when I'm shooting, I don't like to shoot any more than 60 meters because I wear glasses. It actually gets quite difficult to see the target. But on a proper field, shooting up to 100 yards is not uncommon, or about 80 meters. You know, because it's no good in the game to give the player that to aim at. There's just not really any point. But something like that might be a bit more intuitive. Hey Tutors, hey Rabbit. If I'm not keeping up with the chat, I do apologise. This reminds me of another project someone on Discord was making, but I can't put my dart on it. Yeah, so I was mentioning that at the start. I was sort of I'm basically ripping off Dragon Eye's idea, but he did his differently, and it was darts. Darts is not as fun as actually shooting bows and arrows. Right, so let's perhaps start trying to think about getting some real numbers into the world. I have to have a bit of a think what we're doing. See, the thing is, I'm drawing the boss, but I want to draw the boss relative to where the camera is. And we're going to be sort of pseudo-faking the camera a little bit. Depth. Might be time to actually start thinking about just sticking in the reciprocal of depth just to see what happens, really. So it might be that this depth is no longer depth, it's more an fpos variable, and we'll actually calculate depth here. So f depth equals, we'll just try it straight off with an inverse relationship to fpos z. So let's have that instead. And we'll change this parameter to fpos z. Now, need to find, there we go. I think we just hit our divide by 0. Things got out of hand very quickly there. Why would that be? Because there's our, well, I don't know what our depth is. I'm going to put the depth on the screen, our distance, sorry, on the screen somewhere. Draw string. Let's just draw it in the top corner. We'll draw to string f distance. And what colour should we have it? OLC. We'll just have that. We'll have that. What colour are we not using? We'll have that green. We're not using any green, just in case we're drawing on top of something the same colour. And I'll scale that by 4 just to make it visible for us all. Oh, no, I need to do something modern. Here we go. There we go. Now I can form. So straight off the bat, we're at 0. Now, which button do I need to press? So the A button just crashes it out, I think, because we've gone so big. So let's just try that the other way around. There we go. But now our depth is going negative. Now that's okay, because that's kind of how I think the relationship is going to work here. These are actually going to be offsets. So let's just hack that in as being negative distance. Doesn't like that straight away. Okay. I think we're getting hit by our divide by 0. So I'm going to initialize my distance variable to something a bit more sensible. So let's set our distance to 10. I don't know what that means yet. We've not really worked out any sort of real world units. Still can't see anything. So somebody's an archer in the audience here. Randy the Rando. Yeah, I'd usually have my arm guard on. What are we doing wrong here? So depth is coming in as z, f minus depth. So as depth is getting larger, the actual depth here is getting smaller, which means we're drawing things smaller. But I don't think it likes the fact that we're trying to draw a negative radius on the circle. That's probably where it's falling down there, isn't it? Okay, let's just take that back out and just rethink what we're doing here. F distance. Ah, well, it's decided to draw the target now anyway. So carefully press a button. Now, it's difficult for me to perceive if that is kind of right. I think that actually is kind of right? Because as it's further away, it's going to look like it's moving less. But the relationship seems more sensible. As we approach 0, we're hitting the front face of the target. So I might put a hard boundary in now that we don't get any closer. Let's call it meters. We don't get any closer than half a meter to the target. Ah, well, I think passing in the minus distance was a mistake, because if we're passing that straight into this calculation, that gives effectively a negative radius. We'll sort all those bits and pieces out as we progress. So what were we up to then? Now I want to just put in a hard constraint here that we can't ever go. I've already forgotten what the number was. 0.5, wasn't it? We can't go below 0.5. So if f pos z is less than 0.5, tell you what, less than or equals, then f pos z equals 0.5. So we've put a boundary there. You know what we need there? We need a semicolon. The arrow is approaching. Whack. So the distance can still change, but our draw routine is quite happy. So we'll probably equate the distance that we've shot with where the arrow is in world space, I think. Is there a hang on, catch up with some of these things. Kept being thrown off. Yeah, I use vanilla Twitch. I don't have anything particularly complicated set up. I don't run any adverts, or at least I don't know how to run any adverts. Is there a traditional unit system that archers use? Yeah, well, archers will use either metric or imperial. It depends on what round you're shooting, and there's all sorts of different classifications. At my club, 1 week we'll shoot metric, the next week we'll shoot imperial, and the scoring system changes a little bit depending on what you're shooting. Some of my dinner just fell out of my teeth. That's a nice way to start the new channel, isn't it? So now we've got a sort of distance value, we can also start to add some sort of level of detail to the target. So I might try now putting in some scoring lines at a certain distance, and this is where we're going to have to play with some thresholds for the lodding. Lodding is level of detailing, by the way. So we're always going to draw the basic target, I think. Maybe not when it's really far away, but we'll have a look. Basic target. Let me just find a suitable distance just to do something. So I would say we can probably get away with drawing the additional detail at about there, so 4. So if the distance is greater than, well, it's less than 4, then we'll try drawing the additional detail on top. If f pos z is less than or equal to 4, then we'll just draw these score boundary lines. Now in archery, if you hit the line, it always counts upwards. We'll have to factor these sort of things in for the scoring mechanism later. So it's going to be a similar thing. We don't need to draw the background circle. I'm going to just pinch one of these as a template. And to draw in the same place. Now the first boundary marker is going to be at 0.9. which splits the white into 2. That would be scoring 1 point or 2 points in metric, or just 1 point in imperial. Do you dislike text-based games? No, not at all. Not at all. Reading is for nerds. Says the guy who's done nothing but ASCII clones and text-based games. No, don't be a nerd. Javid, will I inform you of your nerdiness multiple times, at least twice? Good. I love the fact that we've got such an international audience here, because most of the time I really don't understand what people are asking me. Right. But that's just the beauty of life, isn't it? That's what makes people more rounded individuals. I don't really hate anybody. So the next marker, we don't want to draw that in white, we want to draw that in black, because that's going to split up the white face. Now the next one will be at 0.7, and we do want that to be white because the colour in the background will be black, so we need to be able to see it. Now that's going to be the oddball one for everything else, because all the others will be black again. So we want to split up the blues now, which will be 0.5, and we want to split up the reds, 0.3. And then we're splitting up the gold. Now you might know gold as being bullseye. It's not called a bullseye in archery, it's called gold. And it's split into 9, 10 and X. There's actually 3 regions in that area. So we'll have to have a think about that. That becomes 0.1 to split it between 9 and 10, and we'll have a half to split the X. And it might be that the half is a level of detail too far. We'll have to see. Oh, hang on, that's no good. 0.05. And we don't want to fill in those circles, or else we're not going to see anything. What we want to do instead is draw the circles. So it's a very simple stream just at the moment. We're not going to, I don't think we'll get it finished tonight, but just want to see how well it works. So we're firing the arrow. Now you see, maybe that's come in too soon, but that does actually look like what an archery target looks like. I don't think we've done so bad there. The 10 zone may be a little big. I see what we're missing. We're actually missing boundaries between the colours as well, so I need to add that. But you see, it starts to get a bit crowded at 0.4, so we may have to change that again. We'll have a think. So I actually need to add in these ones as well. So I'll just quickly throw those together. So for white, we'll stick a boundary on the edge of the original target, the whole scoring zone. So we'll just put that at 1. Goes white, and then we go to black. That's the one that doesn't have one, because white to black, it doesn't matter what colour I put in there. And then black to blue doesn't matter what colour we put in there, but blue to red does. So we'll put in 4 there, and red to yellow also does. So we'll put in a 0.2 there. Let's have a look. Now that looks a lot better. There we go. So it's actually, there is divisions. Have we missed one, or is it just my screen? I think it's there. I use a television. I think I've missed red to blue, haven't I? Which will be 1, 8, 6, 4. No, it is there. It is there. There is a boundary. It's just the contrast on my screen doesn't really show the pixel existing. At least I think there's a boundary there. We'll assume there's a boundary there. Okay, the next stage will be to actually add some numbers to this. Now I can only do... How well is that going to look? I might not bother adding numbers to it at all, simply because I have to scale the numbers smoothly. Now, in the Pixel Game Engine I can do that with the graphics extension, but I can't do it with just the built-in vanilla draw string commands. So I think, rather than having the numbers pop in and out, we'll just leave the numbers off for the time being. One option, of course, is I could have drawn this in an art program and just imported the whole thing as a sprite and sampled it, but I think it looks nice and crisp when it's actually calculated. I agree. ASCII's a good way to start doing things. I've not put in a frame or anything like that for the background either. Yeah, okay. The last thing that we need would normally be on an archery face, but again, I just don't think I've got the pixels to do it properly, is there's a little tiny plus right in the middle, and that's called the spider. and hitting the spider is like the best thing you can do. It doesn't score any more than hitting within that inner circle, but you know, it's kudos. It's just cool if you can do it. Right. So we've got some degree of level of detail. We could probably afford, for example, to spend more time on this and sort of phase them in just a little bit more. So perhaps even at this distance the white can be split, for example. But let's move on with the game mechanics. I think what we also need now to just put things in a little perspective is, well, some grass. So that's going to be easy enough. I'm just going to draw a green rectangle. So we've drawn the skies just blue in the background, but I'll tell you what, instead of dark blue, we'll have cyan. Cyan is sky, isn't it? Might be able to change these with more interesting graphics later on. We're going to, before we draw the boss, draw the grass. So we'll fill a rectangle from 0 and screen height divided by 2. And we want to fill that rectangle screen width and screen height again divided by 2. And we'll colour that green, a dark green I think for grass, so it's not too vibrant. Get my right numbers in. We'll see. Not very dark green, just dark green. There we go. And of course the target will oddly always sort of straddle the two at the moment. Now that doesn't happen in reality. So we may want to, at some point, as part of our perspective, change where we're drawing the grass in the background. Again, details to worry about as we're implementing the game. Now, you might think that I want to use mice to control this, but I'm not going to. I'm going to stick with the keyboard. And I was thinking of this because with the mouse, I can put an artificial cursor there, but I've got to then move the cursor around a little bit, and I don't think doing it with the mouse will feel quite as challenging as doing it with the keys. So we'll also need to draw a targeting reticule, I suppose. We'll call that target X and target Y. Whoa. Oh, come on, David. There we go. We'll default those to being in the middle of the screen, but I'm not going to do it there, I'm going to do it here, because we'll need to play with those as the game progresses. Screen width divided by 2. Now again, we're doing these in screen space. I think ultimately we'll probably want to do all of this in world space. Let's just see what happens. And we'll draw, ultimately I'd like to draw the sprite of looking like you're holding up your bow. But for now I'm just going to draw a crosshair in the right location, I think. I'm going to call it a reticule, but it's not. You know, I'll call it a crosshair. It's not a reticule. So we'll just draw a circle. Now I need to think of a suitable colour. We'll use a magenta, I think. Keep it nice and simple. And this is going to be at target X, target Y. The radius, I don't really know what it's going to be, so let's just pick a number. I'm going to say 20. Might be too big. And OLC magenta, just so it's visible for now. Might have a sprite of a bow later on, so it's looking like a proper Shibuya sight like mine. Very nice. And we'll also draw in some crosshair as well there. So draw a line from F target X. Yeah, that's what we want to do. F target X, we'll do the horizontal one first, minus, just in case we want to change the size of this whilst we're going on, I'm going to hard code in some numbers. N cross size equals, we've said 20, so that's going to be the radius for now. If you see these just subscribed, they're actually from YouTube, and I don't know how to disable them. They just keep popping up. They're not a Twitch subscriber. You get a different one if you've subscribed on Twitch. Cross size is 20, so we want to do minus n cross. Come on, David. Cross size. Let's times by 1.5 on one side, and obviously this one is F target Y, and we want to draw the line just horizontally, so we'll take all of that again, go down here, and this time we'll add to that magenta. So that's done the horizontal one, and now we'll do the vertical one. So now I want to take this bit and stick it there, and this bit. Make sure I got all of that then, and stick it there. Copied the plus, didn't I? I want the plus. Do I want the plus? Yes, I want the plus. There we go. So, do we have some sort of crosshair? We do, and did I not initialize the Y location to the right place? What have I done wrong there? Yes, see? There we go. Just have a quick minute to catch up with some of the chats. Can't you change the colour of the strang to blue? To hide it, string. I think that adding some scenery sprites across the course will move together with us. Yeah, I think, and I absolutely agree. At this point, the PG just ought to have a function to draw a crosshair. Yes, we did that with the recent Gauntlet one, didn't we? That's quite a big crosshair, though, that's come out there. Yeah, so Mr. Docky Ocky worked that one out. F target Y is not a sign. Ah, linebacker, good evening. Thank you for joining us. Right, so now I want to be able to move that around with the cursor key. So it's a bit of nuts and bolts code, which we've seen and done many times, but let's do it. I'll just take one of these to begin with. So I'm going to use arrow keys. So up, F target Y. So we'll have, just in case, again another variable here, because these might be properties of your bow. So we'll have a bow speed, and we'll call that simply 1. And the bow speed, you see, now that might move around depending on what kind of bow you've got, but also things like wind moving it around later. So I'll just put that there. And that'll be minus if we're going up the screen. So I'm still doing things in screen space. I'm not sure if that's how this is going to finish off being done. We'll go down for target Y. We'll increase that one, and we can do pretty much the same for X, but left and right. Quick test. One of the things you'll notice about when I'm trying to build these things is I like to run things frequently. Ugh, that's really, really, really slow. So that's no good, is it? That's because we've told it effectively in screen space to only move so many pixels per second. Because when you integrate time like this number is how many units of whatever are you moving per second. So we probably want to change that by an order of magnitude. Okay, so what I want it to do now is to sort of drift about on its own. So I'm going to add some randomness to it. And as you're holding the draw for longer, so as you're trying to target, it gets slightly more and more unwieldy to control. I'll get rid of the reticule when we're flying the arrow. So if we're saying shooting at 10 yards, be able to line it up, and then it starts to move around on its own. It's not very visible. Might need to think about that. Oh, thanks for the follow, UG. Right, okay, so let's try and add some randomness to it. Now, do I also want to sort of constrain the over? Because if we just sort of let it randomly do its thing and it starts wandering over here, then that's going to classify as a miss. I think I don't really care really, because we need to. This is going to find a bit of an awkward balance we're going to have to find between what the player's intention is doing and what the randomness is doing in the background. So let's randomly move or displace. Displace is a good scientific word, isn't it? Randomly displace target. Or crosshair. Let's not get things confused. Crosshair. Randomly displace the crosshair. So how do I want to go about doing this? I think what I'm going to choose to do... See, if I just add random numbers to it, it's not really going to work. It's not going to move around very much. Yeah, I do want the player to always be overcoming. I don't think a Perlin noise is necessary here. It might be a bit extreme. Projectile motion equations without air resistance. Yeah, well, I don't think I'm going to worry too much about air resistance here. Arrow keys, yep. That's only because right now I'm using the A key for testing, so I'm not going to use W, A, S, and D. I'll probably make that. We can get rid of that towards the end. IX and IY, initial velocity. Then you get smooth random movement. Yeah, maybe you do, but I just think it's probably a bit overcool. Oh, well, thanks. It's good to see you. These streams are a lot more chaotic than the YouTube videos. Well, that's what I was thinking, yeah. So somehow you want it to kind of follow a pattern which isn't very usual. Now, I'm just trying to think of my complex number mathematics here. Could we exploit sort of I used to call them the flower patterns. What were they called? Oh, thanks for the follow. I'm sure you've followed before. Oh. Anyway, could we exploit some sort of complex number theory to move these things around? But the trouble is, it's late and my brain isn't working, so I don't think I want to do complex number theory just yet. Let's see what happens. Let's add some randomness. I'd rather get moving with the game dynamic. So let's choose some random floats in the X and Y axis and see what happens. So float F displace. Oh, arrow is in archery, you dog. Yes, thank you, Gorbit. Now, why didn't the correct thing pop up for that? Just hang on a sec. So if I see, why didn't that happen? I don't know. I just don't know what I'm doing with any of this sort of control stuff. Right, so displace X. Let's choose some random numbers. And we're just going to use rand. I know, you can argue about that yourself. Float rand. Rand max, isn't it? That's it. So that's going to give us a displacement between 0 and 1. Displace Y, and I guess 0 and 1 on its own is not enough. We probably want to subtract half from that. So we've got minus half to plus half. Let's see. And then to my target, I want to add some factor of the displacement. So I probably need an additional one. This is why I was thinking of using polar coordinates instead. But displace amount. So it might not displace it smoothly. And that one we do want between 0 and 1. So let's just add our target vectors. Let's see what happens. So target x plus equals f displace x, probably times some scale factor. So for now, I'll just put in 1. And I guess the scale factor is some parameter of your equipment. Actually, the scale factor we've just calculated, hasn't it? Is f amount. There we go. And just in case, I'm also going to throw in a 0.1 there. Now, do I want to integrate this displacement over time? Probably not. Okay, so the target sort of does wobble a little bit. It's not wobbling very much. Let's increase this this number then. Okay, so on the whole, I'm moving up, but you see, I don't have as much control. So that noise factor is probably, what did we set our actual movement factor by? Bow speed was 10, so it's probably just a bit too much. So I might set that to 3, just so it feels like we've still got control over what we're doing. So I'm moving to the right, moving to the left. See, I think it's too jittery, and the bow speed's just simply not enough. Still far too slow. Bow speed, bow speed, bow speed. Where did I put you? There you go. Bow speed. Let's try something bigger. Yeah, I think polar coordinates is the way to go. However, there we go. That's not too bad. But you see, I don't have the minutiae control. So what I want to do is, as you're taking your shot, that amount or that scale factor gets worse the longer you're trying to line things up. And that's true to archery, because your arms get tired. You're lifting up quite a lot of weight with one arm. Because right now I've got sort of no sensible control over that at that distance. If we zoom into our target a little bit, what's a bit more realistic for the player? So it wobbles around like this, you line up. Then my plan is that you hold down the space bar to draw the bow, at which point everything will settle down, but only for a brief window of time. And then you release the arrow and we zoom forward. So this means we need to start adding in some states into our game. So let's add in, let's hack in a state machine for now. This is how I typically work. So it's a very organic process. So I'll just hack things in, and then I'll refine it, and then refine it, and then probably make a YouTube video out of it if it works. Sometimes not everything makes an interesting YouTube video. And one of the things I like doing now is sort of unnamed enums. So if we have state, what do we call it before we shoot the arrow? So we'll just have state aim, and then we'll have state draw, which is where you're drawing back the string, and then state loose, which is when you let go of the spacebar, state flight, and then finally state score. Let's run with those for now. I'll throw in a next state variable just for the time being, but we'll probably not need to do a full-on sort of partition state machine. We might just get away with hacking that as we need it. But I will initialize the states. So n current state equals state aim. Right. So I guess actually the state is a really dominant thing. Let's just get rid of let's put all the drawing together. So I'll just move that down here. Draw grass, draw sky, and I'll just copy that to draw this. So we're not overdrawing unnecessarily. 0, 0, screen height divided by 2, and cyan for the sky. There we go. Draw target face. And this is draw debug stuff. Draw crosshair, keep that all together. Just trying to keep my program a little bit organized. Okay, so let's put in a big switch statement now for the state. Case, we're going to say state aim. Now I like to just have a set of brackets in my cases, and I prefer my cases indented like that. Just have a quick catch up with what we're doing. Maybe have displacement in random direction that changes every couple of frames. Yeah, you're probably right there. We should probably try and slow it down a bit. Yes, this is it's C++, yep. Drunkard's Walk. Yeah, that's exactly the kind of algorithm that I think is what's necessary here, but we have to sort of combine it with something else. That should be clamped again, right? If the draw time keeps growing, then the random movement will get very spastic after a few seconds. Well, the draw time, yes, will be clamped. So, ideally, you should try and shoot within 5 seconds of drawing back your arrow. Otherwise, it just starts to hurt. It starts to shake. Now, I don't think I'll have it. You never have a situation where you're so tired you've then just got to loose the arrow. You just sort of reset. So I don't want to have some artificial constraint like that. So I do think I just want it to get more and more and more random and difficult to do. So you just have to take your best shot at the end. Right, so in my state aim, that's where I'm going to be doing this sort of stuff. So let's get you into state aim. And I'll just put a little flag here that I think we will probably do want to exploit some sort of polar coordinate math later on. It's been a long day. So state aim, and nothing happens until the user presses the space bar. Now I'm going to do a bit of code duplication here, which I apologise for. And these are the type of things I'll tidy up and make it all smart later on. So state draw. So we want to leave this state once the user presses the space bar. So if OLC, well, it's not OLC, is it? If just get key OLC key space dot pressed. So the idea is you're going to hold it down, that's going to be your draw, and when you release it, that's going to be you're loosing the arrow at that point. So if get key is pressed, then we want to move on to our next state. So current state equals state draw. B pressed. There we go. Actually, we probably want to start putting in some timing information as well here. So at that point, we'll set f draw time to be 0. Add that in as a variable. I think, well, yes, it will stop getting more and more extreme. And that's what we're going to experiment with now, see what we can get that feels right. So I want the same controls when I'm in state draw. That's all fine. Maybe something like the bow speed decreases ever so slightly if we find that the game becomes too difficult to play. But our amount is now some function of draw time. So I think... Now what's going to be the dynamic here? So the player could just go clip and it's done, which is no good. So I think we need a minimum. It takes time to pull the string back. So if you prematurely loose the arrow, nothing happens. So it's only once you're at full draw distance, then will releasing the arrow be a legitimate shot. So let's work it out like that. So that will be a function of draw time. I don't know what that will be just yet, but let's have a look. So if we're in case state draw, then we are increasing draw time. And we'll increase it in real time just by accumulating f elapsed time. So, Sleeping Bear, I keep calling you Zed Leaping Bear, thinking of screaming some stuff to keep myself on my toes. I would say it's quite. I feel a lot of pressure when I'm streaming stuff. I don't know if keeping it on your toes is the right phrase. I think you've got to stream something that you're into doing. That's if you're streaming it just for the sake of doing a stream, it's not going to work. I'm doing this because I think this will make an interesting video, perhaps early next year. Particularly if we can start talking about perhaps some of the complex number stuff as a bit of the theory behind the video. Anyway, f draw time plus equals f elapsed time. That's what we've done. So we've got +3 here. That's our scaling factor. But what I'm going to do now is multiply that by a minimum of 1. Oh, Melku, thanks for the follow. A minimum of 1 plus our draw time. What's going to happen there? So the target's going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. Wow, maybe actually we want it to be fairly. We want sort of a cut-off point. So for the first 2 seconds, you can't. If you let go, you're just resetting. Let's add that in first. So if f draw time is less than or equal to 2 seconds, we want to go back to the aim state. Stephen the Troll, hello. Thank you for the follow. So if we release before 2 seconds is out, then we're going to it just resets. Nothing happens. I think we will have to draw sort of where the draw state is up to on the screen. So 2 seconds is that. Then after the 2 seconds, you've got a window of sort of peace and quiet. Okay, let's see if we can bodge this a little bit. So if it's less than that, everything happens. Else, that's where it becomes our peace and quiet. So everything happens as normal, or we do exactly what we did before. So whilst you're drawing, we keep the same noise profile. So if draw time is less than 2, I need to put in a thing there, don't I? It's less than 2. If get key OLC key space dot released, then just go back to that state. Nothing else matters. It's all over. Else, use the original noise profile. If we're not within the drawback time, presumably we've exceeded that 2 seconds of settling time, we're now into sort of an area of calm. Things get a little bit easier, but we may very quickly get out of control. See, draw time will already be at 2 seconds there, won't it? So maybe we can just bias the numbers a little bit. So this kind of rewards you that if you draw precisely after 2 seconds and you're in the right place, and that's when you loose, that's when the arrow is going to fire. Whoa, right, getting a bit complicated, but so if we release in this state, then we go to state loose. Loose, by the way, is the term for releasing the arrow. Just have a quick catch up with what's being said. Using the mouse, I don't want to use the mouse as the mechanism of aiming for this. I think the keys will be better because I like the idea of having some aftertouch, which we'll play with. Just because it's an arcade game, just makes things a little bit different. If at any point during this time we release, we're going to state loose. Now, should I visualize the draw in some way? Probably. What should we have? Should we have some sort of growing progress bar on the screen that represents the draw, or just, for now, let's just have an indicator which is draw time. So I think we'll add another debug string. Let's just scale that down a tad. And we'll have another one underneath it. F draw time. Just to see what happens with the noise. Right. Okay, so noisy, noisy, noisy. Press space. Now, as I'm holding back the draw, it's getting noisier, and definitely getting noisier and noisier and noisier. And then you'd release space, and that's where it takes the shot. Now, we don't have a state loose yet, and that's why it stops. So let's put in a state loose. Let's try that again. Just want to make sure I understand what's happening around the 2-second mark. So if I'm holding down and let go, nothing happens. Holding down, let go, nothing happens. Pulling back, 2 seconds. I think it goes too quickly out of control there. So maybe what we need is probably an additional bodge factor. Yeah, so it got quite stable, and now it's getting more and more unstable. Well, I'd have hit gold there. We've not added wind and things in yet, though. Right, it's catching up. Aftertouch, as when you lower the bow too fast. Well, that's just poor performance. You shouldn't lower your bow, of course. It's just to make it more of a game. So I'd like to see the arrow travelling through the air as we approach the target. Let me pull that up. So as we approach the target, you've got some degree of left, right, up, down, and control of the arrow. So that makes it a little bit more arcadey, to try and correct your dodgy initial noisy shot. That's the plan. Now you see that shot that I just took, I guess in theory was bob on dead center. Does everything remain relative? Let me just have a think about that, because that might be how we bodge the projection. So let's take a deliberately bad shot here and zoom in. No, of course not. The target's going to need to move out. Well, the crosshair is going to need to move out. So we need to work out now, on that circle, where is our reticule relative. Ooh, that's going to be fun to think about. Yes, see, so that distance, clearly the crosshair is in the red section. It needs to stay in the red section. So we need to displace the target. And that's what I'll probably do to help aim, to help just work out the maths here. We want to displace the crosshair by a factor of our depth. I don't think I'll be too concerned about parabolic motion with this one. So the problem I'm facing now is because I'm targeting a small target here, it's near the center of the screen, but of course the center of my target gets bigger, so I'm always going to hit the middle of it as long as I'm somewhere near the middle of the screen. But the reality is when I took the shot, I'm clearly to the bottom right of the yellow section. I'm in the red there, so as I zoom in, I need to displace the target location accordingly from the middle point. Again, this is probably something we could solve with polar coordinates. So I want to, when I'm drawing my crosshair, also have that as a function of depth, don't I? Okay, so we may actually want to create a draw crosshair function after all. Okay. So this will eventually become the draw arrow function, but let's say draw crosshair for now. X and Y is technically our target X and Y, and Z is going to be the current depth. Let's have a think. But for now, let's just copy this code into that function. Right, okay. So that becomes you, 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 and you. Missed one, didn't I? Yep. And you. Copy. You, 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 and you. Ah, what's that one? So Y. Okay, and so now I need to change those variables depending on Z as being, far too late to be doing maths like this. So what are we displacing them by? Let's just hack in some numbers and see if anything is kind of working as we'd expect it to work. We know that everything at the moment is relative to screen coordinates. Maybe that's a mistake to do. Maybe we should do everything relative to the original boss radius. Yes. That's interesting. If I do everything relative to the boss radius, working out all the scoring and everything later on is much simpler. You can multiply the crosshair X with delta Z. Yeah, that's the kind of thing that I want to do. Why not move the target instead of the crosshair? Well, because I kind of want the whole target in the screen at the end of the shot. I don't want sort of the bottom half of it. But I'm just thinking, have we made a fundamental error right at the start and not doing things in world space to begin with? Which we probably have. But I don't think it's that difficult to change currently. So what is our function of the overall radius? Is very simply 1 over the depth. So if I convert my target coordinate that we've created into a polar coordinate, I can then just scale the radius accordingly. Yeah. Okay, so at the point of loose, we want to work out the radial offset from the center of the target of our current location depending on what the distance of the target is at the time that we loose. Maybe something like that. So let's try and work out what is the current depth of the target when we loose. Well, that's a function of our distance, isn't it? And it's a very simple function. It's just 1 over. Where do we draw our boss? Already lost it. 1 over distance. So let's just get some sort of, I don't know, some number in there. So that is the current radius times, that's our z scaling factor. Our current radius at that distance radius of target is, well, it was just 100, wasn't it? We've actually hard coded that in. So that was 100 multiplied by that. So that's the radius of the target at the point where we loose. So that gives us one of our numbers. Could you make a tutorial video on complex numbers in CPP? I don't think it matters whether they're in C++ or not. Oddly enough, the standard library has a standard complex type, which I find quite unusual that they decided to include a rather strange field of mathematics as part of the standard library. So that's our radius at that point. New x from centre equals old x from centre times 1 over old. That's essentially what I'm going to do, Z Leaping Bear. Yeah, I believe it's this. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. Well, it is a useful thing to have standard complex, but then why stop there? You know, why aren't there then basic primitives for 2D coordinates and 3D coordinates built into the standard library? Why have that particular thing? No, I'm not disputing the validity of your claim that complex numbers are an important thing. Right, I'm losing track of what I'm doing. So right now, that's my radius of target at that location. We can assume that we have released the arrow at the full target. So there is no distance. We're assuming the minimum distance, is that correct? So float f radius of, I guess, arrow in this case, from the center of the target, which would be the square root of f target x. I'm going to be a lot of typing here. Pow. F target x minus the middle of the screen in this case, because we're in screen coordinates at this point. Right, so that's 1, and all of that we want to square, plus, and it's the same for the y. And screen height. So that gives us where our radius of the arrow is from the middle of the screen in screen space. Those two things. So the actual where we hit becomes let's be consistent. Radius of hit is, what did Z Leaping Bear say before? Well, I'm thinking, actually I want to probably do everything using radius and angle, because that way I can do the noise displacement in some interesting patterns using complex numbers. That's why we're discussing complex numbers. And I like the idea that everything is then centered around a central point of the circle. The target is round, the aiming system is round, everything just sort of lines up around this central point. So if you're absolutely dead center on everything, it should all scale into the same location. I just need to make sure I get this bit correct. So radius of hit equals the radius of the arrow from the center times, it's one of these over the other. Let's see what happens. Radius of I think it's radius of target over radius of arrow in this case. Okay. Oh, hang on. Prime Minister again. Radius of hit equals radius of target divided by radius of arrow. Have we got this kind of right? So that means our hit location should be... We need to draw now our radius of hit onto our boss. Let's just do that and see if we're getting the maths in the right place. What have we got going on here? Why have we got an error? Oh, because we've got something daft stuck up there. So this is redundant, isn't it? The drawing the crosshair function. That's not necessary at all. Totally confusing myself now. Too many things going on. Let's just put that back down here. What have we got? Whittle Porg. That's a YouTube sub. Oh, I have to do all this again now. So I'll tell you what. I'll leave the function in and we'll just call it. Draw crosshair. Commented it out now, didn't I? Draw crosshair. F target X, F target Y, and Z is the one thing that we were trying to play with. But for now, I think I've gone off that idea already. Just make sure we're all compiling. I've got everything in the right order. Right. So what I want to do is draw now, along with our when we're drawing the target, where this radius of hit location is. So let's just draw a circle of that radius before we end up working out angles and things. So I'll bodge in just an additional one. Hit radius, and we'll draw one more circle which is always there. Draw circle, circ. And we'll have pretty much all the same things, except I'm going to draw it in I will draw it in green so we can see it on the target, and this time it is hit radius times depth. So when we're drawing the boss, radius of hit, we're going to have to make that something like that. Radius of hit, and we'll just pull that up to here. Oh, hang on, getting some chats. These are too modern, these techniques, Mr. Doki Yoki. Who have we got now? Oh, it's a tweet. Shouldn't it be more logical if comment and uncomment were a single... I always think that. So one of my favourite editors is Crimson Editor, and it's just Control and M. Why has it got to be so complicated in Visual Studio for something you do so often? I know you can set it yourself. Right, where are we up to? We've got an error. Let's go and fix that first. Semicolon. So this is where we're going to find out that we've got all of this horribly, horribly wrong. We're going to have circles drawn all over the screen. It's going to be a complete mess. I'm going to zoom in just a touch. I'm going to loose the arrow somewhere there, and now if we zoom in, it's really, really tiny. Have I got that the wrong way around then? Make sure I'm drawing the right thing first. Radius of hit, radius of hit, radius of hit. State loose, doesn't do anything. Let's see what values we've got when we get to that point. So fire, loose. So the radius of the target is 10, fine. Radius of arrow, 4.73. Radius of hit, 2.029, 2.092. Yeah, I think we've got that the wrong way round, haven't we? Radius of target at that point is 10, because it's that far away. The radius of the arrow at this point is in our screen space. Radius of target is, yeah, I think we've got that backwards. It's a little bit bigger this time than it was last time. Alright, let's just try the obvious. Now that actually works out a bit better, doesn't it? That makes more sense, because if we had the radius of the arrow and we hit it dead center, we would have been dividing by 0. Now we're never in a situation where we can divide by 0. I feel that's better. No confidence that it's better. Okay, so we'll take a shot somewhere over there. Zooming in. Can't even see a green circle now. Isn't this kind of wrong? This doesn't account for gravity. Well, you know, not yet it doesn't. Now this is pseudo 3D stuff that we're doing. I have no idea where my green circle has gone there. Let's just bang that in there again, see what we get. Probably some massive number now, isn't it? Let's release there. The radius of arrow, radius of target, radius of hit, some tiny thing. But then it needs to be multiplied by the, that's what we've forgotten, isn't it? That needs to then be multiplied by the radius of the boss. Because what we're sending through is a percentage of the radius of the boss. I think. There you go. So the actual location we hit is the one we were aiming at. There we go. So the green circle is the sort of the radius of displacement from where I was when I took the shot. Let's just verify that. So if I deliberately sort of send this out here, at that distance, there we go. So that's the radius of the shot, and that now grows proportionally with where we actually shot the arrow. Good. Okay. Maybe I've got a bit of an idea what I'm doing here, but I think I keep calling you Zed Leaping Bear. I do apologise, but I think you're kind of on the right track, because thinking in terms of radiuses now means I've got to work out sort of this angular displacement along that radius. Well, we've worked out the how far it is. We just now need to work out what the deviation in x and y actually is, which is kind of going back on what we were doing. But for now, I'm bodging it just to try and make it work. So we'll run with that for a little bit. How long have we been streaming? Hour and 20 minutes. So let's try and get that sorted out. Right, so we now need the angle. That's what we're trying to do. Angles, angles, angles. So once we've got our displacement, we loose the arrow. Here it is. Radius of hit. We want to try and work out what is the angle of hit. Well, that shouldn't be too difficult to calculate. In fact, we've kind of already got some variables here. Maybe you have to condense some of this code later on. But let's say for now f angle of hit. I'll tell you what, we'll make that a global. Is going to be a tan 2f. Now we'll probably get this 90 degrees out of whack or something, but we'll see what happens. Of the first one as the y argument. There we go. Minus the second one. I will say I'm really pleased with the amount that's turned up to this stream. I was quite surprised. Usually the stream has sort of 8 or 9 viewers, but we're currently hitting 30 viewers at the moment. So thank you very much, all of you guys. The reason I stream on Twitch is to try and avoid the large audiences. But hey, no, I'll take it. So what were we saying? Angle of hit. Float f angle of hit equals 0.0f. So we've got a radius, we've got an angle. Now the angle may well be out by 90 degrees or 180 degrees or something. We'll worry about that in a minute. And I think we'll also we'll just bodge again into our draw boss function what that angle is probably going to be. So now I'll draw a line from the middle of the boss to that location. So we've got our sort of locus of boundary of hit there. We'll draw a line now from the center of the boss, which is offset x and offset y, of course, isn't it? Yes. It's already there. What am I doing? And then we will probably want to use hit radius times radius. We want the sine. No, we don't. We want cos, don't we? Cos f of hit angle multiplied by all of that. It's pretty cool. And we want a y component, which is all of that again, multiplied by y. Now, some of you will be groaning, going, "What is he doing?" Don't worry, you know, these are the kind of things that I try and sort out and make it all a little bit more clear when it comes to making a video out of it. So we'll draw a line like that, and I think what we'll probably also do, since we've got the coordinates of it, I'm going to draw at this location a hit circle of some description as well, so we can sort of see all the different parameters happening at the same time. So I will draw a circle at that location. So let me make sure I've got this right. It gets even more complicated now, doesn't it? So that's now f offset plus that. That's one of our arguments. And then f offset y plus that as the other argument. And we're going to fill this circle. And what colour have we not used, which makes sense? We've run out of primary colours, haven't we? Let's do I don't know, very, very dark red or something. So OLC, very dark red, the darkest of reds. Have I missed a parameter? I've missed out the radius, haven't I? Well, we only want the radius in screen coordinates, so I guess we want that to be 4 pixels wide. Let's run with that. See what it looks like. Did I not calculate the angle correctly there? A tan 2f. Build errors. Yep, that makes sense. F angle of hit. Right. Okay, yeah, it's drawing off somewhere random on the screen, and it's drawing a big hit blob in the middle. Let's get this kind of right. So shoot, just shoot there, and as we zoom in, ta-da! This little dot here is where we were aiming when we took the shot. We got there. We went round the block quite a few times, I think, but you know, we got there. We got there. Okay, let's just try another one. Let's actually try and play it as nature intended. So I want to try and get somewhere near the middle. I've drawn back and release. So I managed to actually hit the target this time, but in this case I've only scored, and we'll count from the middle, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. So that's a 6, and if it was hitting that line, it would still be a 6. If it was hitting this line, even if just the edge of the arrow is touching that line, it counts upwards. So we've managed to work out the location where we've hit. Now what we don't want to do is draw these all the time. In fact, we don't really want to draw the hit until we've done all of the aftertouch stuff, but I think that will probably be in the next stream. So let's just for now bodge in the final state so we can take several shots. So I'm going to just horribly throw in a hack bool here. In fact, you know what? I'm going to display hit. And we only want to do any of this bit if, in fact, we don't really need to see now the circle that we've hit. We don't need to draw the line that we've hit. But if display hit is true, then we do that. So now we want to do the what was the state? I can't even remember what the state was called now. State flight. So that's where we're traveling along. So state loose, we ended up not doing anything at all. Maybe we don't need it as a state, or state loose is where we calculate this original calculation, and state flight is where we're going to do the aftertouch. But for now, state loose is going to do nothing other than pass straight over to state flight. Case state flight. So state flight, we want the distance now to move automatically, don't we? So we want, what have we been doing when we've been increasing the distance? We've been increasing the distance or decreasing the distance? We've been decreasing the distance, haven't we? So f distance minus equals, I don't know what the flight of the arrow is. It's usually about 150 meters a second. We're not counting in for wind resistance and everything else. Cyan, you know, so don't worry about it. But for now, I'm going to assume that it's going to take 2 seconds of travel to travel that whole distance. I don't know. We'll have to pick a number. Times f elapsed time. But we know that we want to exit this state, and we're going to need another state, aren't we? We actually need a state where we see. Oh, we've got one. Look at that. Had the foresight to do it already. Where we actually see what's going on. So state flight is that if f distance becomes, what did we say was our minimum distance? Well, it's going to be 0. So once the distance to the target has hit 0, then at that point we want to move into our next state, state score, and that's where we're going to display our hit. So the user has no sensible control over anything whilst it's flying. And in state score, we'll put in just a quick one. To reset, the user needs to press spacebar again. So if get key, OLC, key space, if that is released, because it's already been released at this point, so the user actually actively has to press it again. In that case, we want to do a bit of a reset. Oh, look at that in a minute. I'm fed up with the Prime Minister texting me. Go and sort out Brexit. we're in the score state. We don't want to be in the score state anymore. We want to go to the original state, which was state aim. I like state machines. I don't think people do enough state machines. I'm typing in state machine now, and people don't do enough state machines in their programs. And current state is equal to state aim again. We basically go back to the start, and we'll set our f target x to the middle again, and our f target y to the middle. I only added one curly bracket. Did I? I missed a semicolon. When we're in state score, that's where we want to reset. But if we're not resetting, what we're doing is instead saying that we want to draw our hit. So B draw score. B draw score equals true, or B draw score equals false. Let's just bang in a draw score variable. False to begin with. Put in a bracket. Why have I put a bracket there? Right, so let me just play this through in my head. We've done that bit. We know that we calculated it. Then we fly along. We don't really know what the speed is going to be. State loose is doing nothing at the moment. So we fly. It's probably going to be really quick until we get to a distance of 0, at which point we enter state score, and that's where we draw on the board where our current score is. Are there any other things I need to... Oh, I need to reset the distance, don't I? So what have we been setting the distance to begin with? What was that? Set to, on user create. No, didn't set it there. Where did I set it? 10. So we'll reset the distance as well. Reset the distance. I think that's it, is it? We'll find out. Reset the target, reset the distance. Draw time doesn't matter, that gets reset later on. Let's see what happens. Hey, blue snow. Right, so let's take a shot anywhere. I'm not even going to try and aim it. There. Good. So we probably don't want to draw the crosshair when we're taking the shot, but that's where the dark point there is where our arrow went. Now I'll try and put in some perspective arrows later on, which might look a bit nicer. So I press spacebar and it resets. Oh, hang on, we're still drawing. Why are we still drawing? We don't want to do that. B draw score equals false. Oh, well, schoolboy error there, wasn't there? Come on, Javid. Right. It also flew very quickly, so I'm going to, I'm going to bring that right back down so the player can enjoy watching the flight of the arrow. So we'll try. Let's aim for 12 o'clock blue. Release. Arrow flies, and we hit in the black. It's not very visible. The target. So what I think we'll do is we will draw 2 circles to show where we've hit. One of each colour. A high contrast colour and a low contrast colour. So we'll fill the circle and then we'll draw the circle with... We'll draw it with a white outline. Make the dot bright pink. Well, my magenta is kind of bright pink, but okay, I will do. We'll go back and compile. So let's just try that. Oh, I loosed too early. I think the draw time might be a bit too long, the 2 seconds. Take the shot. Bang. So that's where the arrow actually landed. Now, I should be able to try and make this a bit easier for myself. So if I walk a bit closer to the target, let's aim there, drawing back, hold it down, bang, exactly where we aimed. Very good. Right, well, I think that's been a good start to the stream. So I think that's probably enough for me. Thank you very much, guys. Does anybody know if anybody on the Discord server is going to be streaming next? Shout out if you know of anybody that's part of the community that's streaming. I don't think there is. Okay, you want the center of the dots? I'm going to. You know what? Sorry, I'm sorry, Blue Snow, or no, Cyan Hunter. I'm going to keep the dot as it is because they kind of look like that. We'll dress it up with fletchings and things later on as well. I just wanted to get the main mechanics sorted out. So let's take another shot. So if I completely miss. Yeah, so it was a complete miss. So I'm pleased that the numbers are adding up. Let's see if I can actually get one in the middle. It's not bad. Oh, it wasn't that good. Now, one interesting dynamic here to think about is we're currently moving everything around in pixels, but the number behind the scene is in floating point units. So even though I've only got 1 pixel difference in the crosshair, that could represent quite a large distance of difference on the target. Let's try again. So 0, fire. Yeah, that's probably about accurate for me. One last time. It's getting out of control. It's getting out of control. Get over. Well, I didn't do too bad. I am good at archery. I'm not bad at it at all. Thanks, Toothbrush. Yeah, cheers. I don't think anybody else is streaming that I know of. I've not got very many Twitch sort of friends other than the people on the OLC Discord, so I don't really know who to send you all to. So I won't. What I'll do is I'll say thank you very much for watching, guys. I think it's been a good stream, and everybody take care. I'll see you next time. I can't put this on the YouTube for another 24 hours, though, so if you've only got the end of it, you'll have to wait. Take care, everybody.